Good evening. My name is Brian Leib. I'm the Executive Director of the Iranian Americans for Liberty, and I'm currently sitting in IAL studio right here in Washington, D.C. On behalf of our Board of Directors, please allow me to welcome all of you to this evening's virtual congressional meet and greet with Congresswoman Michelle Steele from California's 48th Congressional District. In addition, I'd like to say hello to everyone out that's currently out in the Congresswoman's Congressional District in Costa Mesa, California at IAL's Orange County Watch Party. Thank you so much for being with us this evening on the other side of the country, and we hope that you enjoy tonight's conversation. This evening's event is our 15th virtual congressional meet and greet of 2021. And before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our organization. The Iranian Americans for Liberty are a bipartisan group of Iranian Americans from all around the nation that are working together to support and strengthen U.S. foreign policy and national security solutions that bring democracy, human rights accountability, and freedom of speech to Iranians living under the oppressive Islamic Republic of Iran. Please visit our website at IranianAmericansForLiberty.org to learn a little bit more about our organization. And please be advised that tonight's event is for educational purposes only, and all of our events are always free and open to the public to join. At this time, it's my pleasure to kick the program off and introduce tonight's very special guest. But before we get started with our Q&A, I'd like to read a very short bio about this evening's special guest. Congresswoman Michelle Steele is serving her first term representing California's 48th District. She was born in South Korea, raised in Japan, and Michelle immigrated to the United States to build her own American dream. She's one of the first Korean American women to ever serve in Congress. And after fleeing North Korea during the Korean War, her parents met and built a life in South Korea before moving to Japan. Her father was a diplomat who encouraged the now Congresswoman at a very young age to move to the United States to become fluent in English. Her mother and younger sisters joined her in coming to America, where they opened a clothing store in downtown Los Angeles. The Congresswoman currently serves on the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, as well as the Committee on Education and Labor. And we'll be talking to her a little bit later in the program about these committee assignments and how she uses them to best serve her constituents. Finally, Michelle has been married to her husband, Sean, for 39 years. They have 2 adult daughters that reside in Surfside, California. So Congresswoman Steele, thank you very much for joining us here this evening, and I'd like to turn it over to you for some brief opening remarks before we jump into our Q&A. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me today, and I'm so grateful to be here. Actually, not just answering questions, but you know what? I love to learn. So I'm very happy to be here. Just flew in today from California.
Well, thank you again for being here. So let's jump right into the Q&A here.
Sure.
For one of our first questions, let's talk a little bit about what's happening in California. Mm-hmm. So you have been a very strong voice, vocal leader regarding the ongoing backlog at California's ports, the ongoing supply chain issues across America right now. You recently joined House Republican leadership to address these issues, and during this press conference, you stated, "We have a crisis happening at our ports, and we need to solve these bigger supply chain issues, not double down on failing economic policies that make life for the American businesses and workers harder and more expensive." So Congresswoman, first of all, we couldn't agree more with this statement. But please update your constituents that are watching us right now about what's happening at these California ports, if you don't mind.
You know what? These liberal policies actually made this happen. So White House saying that because of pandemic last year, that's the reason that all these congestion happened. We have about over 100 cargo ships waiting outside. Usually I see it from Seal Beach to maybe Huntington Beach, now all the way down to Newport Beach. And that's the problem we have, because in California, AB 5 means most of independent contractors, that they cannot work by themselves. So means that there's no more those independent contractors, they have to belong to some of the companies. But these truck operators, half of them are owner operators, means that they cannot come into California and work because it's illegal. Second thing is that California, that if your truck is over 3 years old, then you cannot come in. So think about that. So President Biden said, port has to open 24/7. Yes, that's part of it. But right now, truckers not coming in, they cannot come in. Then who's going to deliver these cargoes outside of California? That's the problem we have. And those cargoes been just like unloaded out there, and then they're waiting. Now storage room rent is more than 10 times compared to last year. And then one cargo opening takes about $3,000 that you have to pay to open each cargo. Now I heard last week was $18,000. That really creates inflation, means that all consumers have to pay more. So we really have to change the fundamental problem in California, and not just California, but nationwide.
Well, it sounds like you've been a very strong voice on this, and I'm sure you're going to continue to be a strong voice on this and taking a leadership position on this issue, which is so very important. So for our next question, let's talk a little bit about your committee assignments. It's something interesting that we like to do to educate the public because the banner share of the public, they don't really know what happens on these committees. So you're serving on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, as well as the House Committee on Education and Labor. Could you tell us a little bit more about, how do you use your time on these committees to best serve your constituents?
Well, Transportation Committee, that, we have to really looking at the infrastructure bill just came in for $1.2 trillion. We really have to looking at the income revenue side. But you know what? Lawmakers usually they don't look at the revenue side, but they're always looking at the expenses and how much we're gonna send out. So I know the numbers and I know how to count. So you know what? Always looking at those. Especially I try to stop that California high-speed rail, and I'm not against the high-speed rail. As you said, that I was raised in Japan, so I used to ride from not just from Tokyo to Osaka, but from Hokkaido, actually under the water island, and coming down to Tokyo. I tried to say California because I came from California. So you know what? I am very much for it. But in California, it goes nowhere to nowhere. And original price tag was $30 billion. Now over $100 billion. And it's supposed to start some section this year. And you know what? Didn't even start yet. Think about it. So I asked Transportation Secretary actually during the hearing that I said, I support high-speed rail, but this is from nowhere to nowhere. And do you think you're going to still pushing it with spending California taxpayers' money, not just California taxpayers' money, your money too? And he said, well, it's a test case. I said, I don't think Californians want to be a guinea pig, because we are, as of now, that we are paying 13.3% income taxes. Think about it, for state. And you want to pay more taxes on the top of it. So we really have to stop that. So I love to work at the Transportation Committee that, talk about that, how we're going to stop this money pit, high-speed money pit that you have to just keep pouring money in. And then who's going to ride? We have Southwest actually flying from LA to Sacramento for $100 per each way. That's going to cost for riders, what, $800? And from nowhere to nowhere. That's what happened. How about education? I love this committee. National School Boards Association just called these parents that they came out and speak up. Guess what? They called these parents domestic terrorists. Can you believe that, parents know their kids more than anybody else? And these people, school board members, they were elected, means these parents are actually their constituents. Means that you have to listen to them. Instead of that, they are domestic terrorists. It's not heard of. I couldn't believe that what they did. They apologized. But how about our Attorney General Garland ask FBI you know what? I have very thick accent, so forgive me because I speak Korean as my first and Japanese
We can do this
my
in
second.
Korean if you'd like. No?
I can speak any other language is much better. But you know what? Think about it. And they apologized to these parents, but our own Attorney General is not reversing FBI directive So it's really odd why government has to get involved, why they are calling our parents that, who wants to go right direction. And they're very much concerned about their kids, so they're expressing their First Amendments. How dare you calling them that they're domestic terrorists? Give me a break. So you know what? I keep sending a letter out, keep talking about it, and I love these committees because you can really speak up, you can save money, you can do better job for infrastructure, and you can do better on transportation, and you can help some of the parents. So I love it.
That's amazing, and I got to tell you, I couldn't agree more with the words that you just mentioned with regards to parents knowing what's best for their children. What a novel thought that parents know what's best for their children. You and I can agree, and there's so many millions of Americans that agree with that. Unfortunately, it seems like some people in our government are pretty tone deaf on that. And to your point, they want to call parents domestic terrorists for wanting to have, we'll use one of their words, equity in what's happening in their children's education. So thank you for giving us a little bit of an insight of what it looks like on a committee. Sounds like you're using that time very wisely. Let's shift to another issue that's very important and very recent, unfortunately, in your congressional district. A couple weeks ago, there was a very large oil spill, right off of the coast of California. It hit the beautiful beaches that you have over there very hard. And you've been extremely vocal on this issue. You've sent a letter to President Biden requesting a major disaster declaration for Orange County. You've hosted and joined countless calls and meetings with local officials. You've personally surveyed the damage firsthand. By all accounts, you're leading with not just words, but also with action on this. Side note, I wish some other members of Congress would take a page out of your book on that. But for the constituents that are watching us right now that saw this happen real time, give them a really quick update and just your message about what's happening with this oil spill.
That oil spill, that was devastating because not just for us human beings' health, but wildlife. I have a lot of conservancies in my district, and I went out the first thing that not just with the Coast Guard and flew over, but I went out to conservancies and see that how much oil spill affected to those. You have to really look at it. Those rocks and these are crude oil, so it's very hard to wash it off. So that was really bad. Then I found out that a lot of people think that we have oil pipes because we have 8 platforms in Orange County coast. But you know what? You're looking at them and then you said, oh, we have oil pipes under the water. And you found out that you have sewer pipes, you have cable lines. There's a total different maps actually under the water. And we have those cargo ships coming in, and more than 100 cargo ships. We have about 60 spots that you can put your anchor. Do you know how heavy these anchors are? 30 tons for each anchor. Coast Guard is actually telling them where to put those, about 60 of them. So the other 40, when they hit the ground, you knew something's going to happen. That's why I introduced the SHIP Act. It's a temporary act until congestion is gone, 180 days or less than 180 days. They have to park, actually put anchor down after from the shore, 24 miles nautical miles means that it's about 27 miles away from the shore, means that they are avoiding those pipelines. Because you knew something's going to happen. So we really have to stop this. And I asked actually Coast Guard that you must be overwhelmed when you have over 100. How are you directing these ships to put their anchor down? And then I asked, there's an agency called, it's very hard to pronounce, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. They are the one handling all the maps. And I asked them, when was the last time you surveyed the map? Because it's under the water, so it's been shifted. And then second, is that map accurate? You're gonna find out. I sent a letter out, I never got the response yet. It's just so frustrating. On the top of it, I asked President Biden to declare major disaster, right? Because we had the air show. We had over 1 million people came on Saturday. They shut down on Sunday completely. Out of 1 million, 500,000 people are outside of they're not Orange County residents, they're visitors. So we lost so much financially, businesses, and financially for these individuals that. So I asked that to declare the major disaster means that FEMA and SBA coming in and they can help these businesses, because I know AirShow lost millions of dollars because that one day shutdown. So it affected so many businesses, and you know what? We shut down for almost more than a year, right? And especially California, they have to run the businesses because small businesses, about 40% cannot come back from pandemic. So we really have to help them out. That's the reason I asked President Biden. I asked actually our governor to send a letter out to President Biden. But you know what? I didn't hear from both sides.
Well, at least you're fighting the good fight. It sounds like, and I looked on your website and saw all the things that you've done on this. And like I said, you're leading, and not just with words, but with a lot of action. And I think your constituents recognize that and know that you're fighting for them. So keep up the good fight for them, please. So we've talked about some issues in your backyard, in your congressional district, and now we're going to talk a little bit about some foreign policy issues and specific to our organization. So the Islamic Republic of Iran, which took power in 1979 after the Islamic Revolution, the leadership of the country is constantly chanting death to America, death to Israel. And there were some elections over the summer. We personally think they were sham elections, not real elections, but Abraham Raisi was sworn in as Iran's new president. Congresswoman, he's a hardliner by all accounts. He's earned the nickname The Butcher that his people have given him for his role in overseeing the execution of thousands of Iranian citizens over the last couple decades. So I'm curious, do you think that President Biden should continue forward, with diplomacy with this other country that clearly doesn't share our values? They don't want us to succeed, and now they have a leader that is a massive human rights abuser. So do you think we should keep down this path of diplomacy?
Because I was very much, disappointed at President Biden because he tried to negotiate with Iran's government, President Raisi, if I pronounced his name right. And you know what? They cannot even have a direct communication. They have to use one of the European countries and then kind of like going through. And why you want to communicate with this kind of butcher? That because Iranian people deserves their freedom, and they have to really work on that, they really want it, right? Because like what we have here, we have our freedom. We can say whatever we want. I mean, you cannot be violent, but other than that, you really have to speak up like parents, what they do. But you know what? Iranians right now in Iran, they cannot do it. And then he wants to help Iranian government to dismantle nuclear weapons. Think about that. How about North Korea? Can you even go and investigate exactly what's going on? How are you going to trust these governments? So when you don't trust them, you should not communicate. You have to just watch exactly what they are doing, and you have to fight against it.
Well, I think you just made a very clear distinction, if I may, in that there are the Iranian people, and then there's the Iranian government, Iranian regime. And I think we're all in agreement that we would do anything for the Iranian people to have these basic human rights that we all have and enjoy here in America. But unfortunately, the regime and the government that runs that country they don't share those beliefs. So you mentioned freedom of speech. There is no such thing as freedom of speech inside of Iran. If you speak out against the regime, you're in jail within days, and God only knows what potentially happens to your family. So thank you for those strong words, and I know the community will appreciate that. So we're going to keep the focus for the next question on the current administration. As you might know, world leaders were in Vienna this whole summer. U.S. leaders, European leaders, Iranian regime, everyone was there trying to get back into the JCPOA 1.0, 2.0. U.S. Special Envoy to Iran, Robert Malley, who, by the way, was one of President Biden's first appointees, which is very interesting. But he's back in Europe now for another round of negotiations. And 2 weeks ago, he publicly stated that the United States and President Biden are fully prepared to lift every single economic sanction on the Iranian regime just to get them back to the negotiating table. Now, keep in mind, the Iranian regime and Raisi, with him taking power, have stated that they're not going to entertain any conversations with the Biden administration until the U.S. removes all of these sanctions, re-enters the JCPOA, no conditions placed on the Iranian regime without extracting any kind of concessions, right? So you have our group who takes a pretty strong stance on this, and then you have other groups, a group called NIAC, the National Iranian American Council, who believes the U.S. government should go back into the JCPOA. No questions asked, no concessions. They think it is our obligation as America to go back into this deal. As I said, we've taken the opposite position. So I'm wondering, do you think that the U.S. should get back into this JCPOA, lift the sanctions on the regime without any benefit to us as the American people? What are your thoughts on that?
I tell our viewers, no. Let me start from there, because how are you going to trust this government? Because you know what, you just tell them to come out to the table, and then let's negotiate. I'll give you this so you get rid of nuclear weapons. Do you think they're going to listen to you? That's exactly what we saw in North Korea. I keep going back to North Korea because both parents fled from communism. So you know what? I've been listening to them all the times, and I knew exactly what was going on. So no, we should not go back. But what kind of guarantees that they're going to give you? Even you're going to sit on, round table and try to negotiate. But how are you going to find out that they're telling the truth or not? So you really have to be careful. But you know what? Get rid of sanctions? You can't do that, because you have to penalize what they've been doing to Iranian people. Then you have to looking at that first. Then you should not do it. So go back to the table. It's not going to work.
And just to add on to that, it's a flawed or failed premise, right? That we think having negotiations with the Iranian regime is going to produce an outcome. At the end of the day, we believe that they're just bad actors, and we can talk to them till we're blue in the face and they're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, they've stated pretty clearly how they think about our country and of our allies in the region. So I appreciate those words, and I'm sure our audience does as well. So we're going to keep the focus on the Iranian regime and some of their actions throughout the world. Widely known that the Iranian regime funds terrorism all around the world. They are the leading sponsor of terrorism. They have been for decades. Congresswoman, they spend billions of dollars every year funding, both financially and operationally, supporting groups like Hamas and Palestinian Jihad inside of Israel, Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is on Israel's northern border, and also the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Over the last couple of months, there were Iranians that were protesting inside of Iran for one of these reasons. They were sick and tired of their people, as they should be, sick and tired of their government spending money funding terrorism all around the world. Well, they don't have basic human rights. They don't have access to running water. They don't have access to dependable electricity. So the question I have for you, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to let you answer this. Do you stand with the Iranian people, who have risen up to protest for these basic human rights?
Yes, I do. Because they are asking just basic human rights, water, electricity. Why government has to wasting their money to build a nuclear weapon and support these terrorists? Instead of that, they have to think about their people first. And that's always coming down to that, they're just basic rights. We are not even talking about other stuffs, some fancy stuffs, but you know what? Basic water, electricity, food. Isn't that basic things that government has to do? So you know what? You really have to think about that first, before you support this Iranian government that, they are just going after all these people that protesting. But, they just want to have freedom. So government has to listen to Iranian people.
Well, I hope that day will come. And certainly the Iranian people, I can tell you, inside of Iran, here in America and throughout the world, love this country. Here in America, the Iranian American community contributes in so many amazing ways. And the day will come when the people inside of Iran have the basic freedoms that we enjoy here in this country, and that day will come, and you are certainly on the right side of history with that. So thank you for that. So for our next question, we are going to play a question, or play a video message for you. Okay. That is from, in my opinion, one of the most well-respected Iranian Americans in California. Her name is Lisa Daftari. Mm-hmm. So producers, if we could cue up that question, that would be great. And we're going to be right here.
Good evening, Congresswoman Steele. My name is Lisa Daftari, and I am a journalist and political commentator living in California. I wanted to thank you for your advocacy and support of Iranian Americans in our nation's capital. My question for you is this. President Biden has promised to remove all sanctions from the Iranian regime in return for them to come back into compliance with the Obama-era JCPOA. In your opinion, do you think the U.S. should be removing sanctions from a murderous regime that is the world's greatest exporter?
So, Lisa, thank you for the message. And Congresswoman, your thoughts?
Let me just say simply just one word, no.
I think that's good enough. Nothing
right.
more than that is needed. Fantastic. Okay, so we're in our final question now.
Okay.
We talked about domestic policy, foreign policy. This has nothing to do with politics at all.
Okay.
It's a fun question. Mm-hmm. You can let your hair down a little bit. So for the last question, if you could have dinner or lunch or breakfast, whatever meal you'd like, with any two deceased individuals, first question is, who would those two individuals be? Second question, where would you have that meal?
Actually, my first campaign started with President Ronald Reagan. I had a picture with him after he stepped down from presidency, and I really want to sit down and discuss about that. He's been so much liked and loved by people because I see a lot of really angry people, meanness that you see from politicians, but you know what? He was always smiling. So I want to be like him. So I want to sit down at his ranch and we can share the meal, and I want to learn that how he can deal with these that the other side, that you don't agree, but how you deal with it with a smile. Second person is that I was very lucky to have Barbara Bush at my house, and for when President George W. Bush ran. So she and her grandson George P. Bush were at my house, and she was another that great wife of president, and she always smiled. She has this warmness that I think sometimes I get really upset that I am lack of. So you know what? I want to sit down with her. I had dinner with her. I mean, actually in my house, but you know what? We had so many people were there, and I didn't have chance, except that we just talked about a little bit that how to support your husband, that who is a politician. Now, actually, I want to sit down with her and my husband, and I want her to tell my husband that how to support me. Actually, he supports me over 400%. But you know what? Those two people are my favorite people, and I want to sit down at my house, and this time just three of us and having nice dinner. That's I always dreamed of.
Well, it's a beautiful dream to have, and I'll tell you, just in our interaction here, you certainly are extremely warm and extremely personable. So I think that you are executing on that vision for sure. So Congresswoman, thank you very much for being here. We've reached our time limit for the conversation today, and on behalf of my organization, the Iranian Americans for Liberty, I really want to thank you for taking the time to connect with our community. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to provide some brief closing remarks and just reminder that we have your constituents out in Orange County right now. So if you have a message for them too, that would be great. So the floor is yours.
You know what? I came here in this country when I was 19, barely speaking English. And now that, after I won and I was standing in front of Capitol, I had teary eyes. I achieved the American dream. I want every American to achieve their American dreams because you can do it. When I can do it, I think you can do better. That's what I want to tell them. And let's have happier life because a lot of times we're looking at all these media and then we are very angry. We are very obsessed. I think, you know what? Life is very short. I think we should enjoy our lives and have much better life than what we have and just angry about. So that's what I want to do. And I want to serve my constituents better. So anytime that I'm going wrong direction, please let me know. And I'm actually ready to listen to you. So thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm just so grateful. And I have a lot of things to learn. And I will do that next few years.
Well, the honor is all ours for hosting you and for being with you. As our event comes to a close, it's a good time to tell our audience in Orange County and everyone around the country that's watching about our next congressional meet and greet that we're having. This is our 15th, by the way.
Wow.
We started in February and our 15th so far. So we've been relatively busy, to say the least. We're going to be hosting Congressman Andy Biggs from Arizona next week, Tuesday at 6 p.m. right back here in IAL Studios. So please make sure you take a look and stay involved with that coming up. But Congresswoman, thank you for your time. Wishing you only all of the best in your current role, any future endeavors, and know that you have a friend in our organization and in your constituents. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me today.
Our honor. Thank you so much.